You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 58 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam. With me, as always, is Cal. And Cal, we are smack dab in the middle of the month of June, running through some different episodes of Superman the Animated Series. Unlike with our Batman shows, we don't go in order. So we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but this episode kind of stood out to us. It is the episode Where There's Smoke.
Yeah, so we have an introduction of Volcana, who I've learned today is a character that was created specifically by Bruce Tim Paul Dini for this show. And it also introduces another thread that will continue later on in Justice League Unlimited and Justice League, and that being Project Cadmus.
Yes.
Which, of course, plays a huge role in the later seasons of Justice League Unlimited. So, very important to the DCAU here. We're kind of uncovering some things here. You know, it didn't even dawn on me that this was the first episode with that. So a lot of Superman laid a lot of groundwork for some important, really impactful stories that were told later on in Justice League.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, as you mentioned, this is sort of our first. They don't actually say the name Cadmus, obviously, but it's sort of our first inclination that the government is sort of funding research and sort of turning people with powers into their own sort of private weapons. And we find out here that sort of this shadowy, dark agency has used this character Volcana as an assassin, potentially as a thief over the years. And when we meet her, she's sort of broken free of their control and is sort of trying to live as a criminal and is stealing, which sort of puts her in direct conflict with Superman.
Well, before we go there, do you have an episode synopsis for us, Liam?
Yes, I do. I have the official episode synopsis, or at least the episode synopsis is on IMDb, and that episode synopsis reads as such. While hunting the pyrokinetic supervillainous Volcana, Superman learns of a mysterious organization that's seeking her as well. Which is, in fact, what happens.
They are to the point. They don't mess around in those synopses.
Absolutely not.
But synopsi.
But yeah, as we sort of have this initial scene where Clark and Jimmy are covering this yacht club event. Volcana shows up to steal some ship merchandise.
Some yacht things.
Some yacht stuff.
Yes.
And, of course, has a brief fight with Superman. Clark Kent goes back after it's become a police scene. And
runs into the president from 24.
Right. The TV's Dennis Haybert tells him to basically bug off, and that they give him some sort of lame excuse as to why he can't investigate further. He's then followed by another agent that's dressed like a homeless man, and sort of you start to unravel. So I did like that they give you a little bit of Clark Kent being the investigator, a little bit more of Superman using his brain a little bit more in this one. Yeah,
it was interesting. My first thought was, as he goes after this incident happens, he doesn't go back. If Bruce Wayne was there at an incident like this, where there's an explosion, there is no question that he goes back at night dressed as Batman.
Yes.
He's going back as Batman. He's gonna wait until somebody's not looking, duck in, do his investigation, and duck out.
Yeah.
Without ever being seen. Clark Kent does not go back as Superman, which he could have. He could have gone back and busted open a window and done his own investigation.
Sure.
But instead, he shows up as Clark Kent, the reporter. Because why? Because he has an actual day job that he likes to do.
Yeah.
And he's there to do his investigation. Because not only is he interested as Superman, but he's interested as Clark Kent, who is the predominant alter ego of the two between Superman and Clark. So he is Clark Kent, who turns into Superman, not as opposed to Batman, who daylights as Bruce Wayne.
Right, puts on the facade of Bruce Wayne when he has to. Yeah.
Right. So
Superman likes being Clark Kent. He likes being an investigative reporter.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
But that's a cool dynamic in that. But no, I did notice that. I thought that was interesting, and I appreciated it too, because he does a lot of investigative work as Clark. He then goes to this paranormal it's sort of like, I guess, the Xavier School for Gifted
Yes.
Youngsters in the DCAU. He goes to this school that he did they say how he found out that this school existed?
I guess he did some research.
He Googled?
Yeah.
He used the Google machine?
Yeah.
Okay. So he shows up at this paranormal research school for youngsters and begins doing some investigating. Finds out that the government is part of the funding for it. While they're there, this guy that is only known as the director of the facility is taken away and attacked, sort of. He has to run away scared, and Clark witnesses this intimidation that these government agents are doing and trying to take him away, all because they're trying to get to Volcana. They want to know where Volcana is, and they think this guy can provide it. So he eventually divulges some information. Superman realizes that this government agency isn't directly the government. It's a sort of a rogue agent operating outside of the government's scope of for his own personal gain, I guess.
Yeah.
Sort of? Is it? Wait, do they ever tell you, like, is it for his personal gain?
It's not exactly clear. At the end, it's sort of said that they are reclaiming, once they recapture Volcana, they're saying they're going to sell her to a foreign government who wants to do experiments on people with powers.
I see.
So whether or not at that point it was at one point sort of an actual government, like Black Ops team, and now they're just in it purely to profit off of these metahumans, like, that isn't completely made clear. But it is said that she kind of asks, like, oh, who do you want me to kill now? And he goes, actually, I'm just gonna sell you, and that's kind of it. And then Superman shows up to save the day. And as we're getting finishing up our plot here, the ending of this episode is one of, like, the most jarring and just weird ways. So Volcana goes to confront the director. He's Nick Fury. He's Nick Fury. Almost literally, he's a brown-haired man. The original Nick Fury, not Samuel L. Jackson version.
Right.
It's a brown-haired man with a strong jaw and an eye patch, working for a shadowy government organization
with a chin cleft.
Yes, it's very, very clearly just Nick Fury. But anyway, so she confronts this guy, Kurt.
No, he's not. It's Kurt.
Right,
It's
his name's Kurt Fury.
Kurt, no last name, but definitely Fury.
It's definitely Fury.
It's Nick Fury's brother.
But anyway, so she's confronting Kurt, and it appears like she's about to kill him. Superman intervenes. There's an explosion that she causes, and then immediately after the explosion, it cuts to Superman bringing her food on a desert island. And they sort of have, like, a throwaway line about how, like, he didn't take her to prison because I guess the prison wouldn't have been able to hold her or something, and they sort of have, like, a cute little, like, flirtation, and then he flies away and she watches the sunset. So it's just a super bizarre way to end this episode. And, like, you would think there would at least be some dialogue where he's like, well, because you were abused and used by the government, I didn't think you deserved to go to prison or something. Because, like, clearly, right, like, Superman made a moral choice to not arrest this woman, right? Like,
right, but here's my problem with that, right? When she goes to confront this guy, and eventually she has him right where she wants him, and she's about to kill him, Superman says, let the justice system decide, right?
Yes.
He's a big proponent, truth, justice in the American way.
Right.
Let the justice system take care of it. That's what any good superhero would say. Got to put him through, let him have a trial, let them convict him. That's how we do it in America. So she doesn't do that. Right. She doesn't directly then just kill him, but she ends up doing something that kills him. Likely, it's intimated that he is killed along with a lot of other people, and they were bad people.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, they were bad guys. But a lot of people are killed.
Yes.
Superman doesn't do to her what he suggests that she do to Kurt Fury,
right,
which is let the justice system handle it. Superman decides he's martial law, and he's deciding that she's not going to prison. She's going to an island to serve her time.
Right. And if it was addressed why he made that decision, or, like, yes, like, he sort of has a conflicting opinion because, yes, this is what I've always believed, but this woman was sort of used and abused by, the governing body that I've sort of always tried to uphold, and so he's conflicted about it, and he sort of chooses to let her go at the end, that would kind of be one thing.
Or what if Maggie Sawyer shows up to the scene at the end, like, you know, Metropolis PD shows up, or there's unnamed government agent who shows up and's like, we're taking her away to, you know, put her away, we're going to do the... And Superman says, I'm not willing to stay here and watch you put her through experiments. Or Maggie Sawyer's like, there's no way we can handle her at Metropolis PD or, at wherever they're going to take her. So Superman's like, I'll handle it, don't worry, I'll take care of her. And they come to some agreement that way. But just for Superman to have that throwaway line where he's like, well, I could have taken you to Metropolis Women's Prison, but instead you're here on this island, it's weird.
Yes, it's just a very bizarre, and the fact that it happened so quickly from the explosion to, like, it's 9 seconds later, we're on the island chatting about peanut butter. So it's just very bizarre. I gave plot, again, this is a very... I wouldn't say it's a bad episode, and like you said at the start of the show, it has building blocks for sort of the future of the DCAU, so it is important. Mm-hmm. I give it 5 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Like there's elements of it I like, and I think if the ending was better, I would have given it a much higher score. I might, this might be in the 7 or 8 range, but because of the weird ending and sort of the non-resolution of why it happened this way, I think that brought my score down a little bit.
I gave it a 6 out of 10, and agree with you completely, surprisingly. We're very agreeable guys. We're not just brothers, we agree a lot also.
It's true.
But I think there's one additional plot device that we missed, and then we'll move on to our next category. 4 words, Jimmy Olsen's masturbatory habits. Moving on. Music? Shall we talk music? Yeah, no, there's a throwaway line at the beginning where Jimmy's taking pictures at this yacht club event, and Clark mentions something about how just because Volcano walks into the room and Jimmy's taking pictures of her, and there's mumblings, and it's like a 1930s. Ah, there's a woman who just walked in the room. Look out, see? And very much like Pretty Poison, where Poison Ivy's leaving the room.
That dame's a real knockout.
Right. So the room is suddenly a buzz because this attractive woman walked in the room, and Jimmy's taking pictures, and Clark mentions how it's not necessarily newsworthy that this attractive woman's there, and Jimmy mentions that it's for his own private collection.
Oof.
All right. It's cartoon.
If you just wanted to know.
Yep, now we know.
We know what Jimmy Olsen cranks it to. You're welcome, children. This is a family show.
Next category, right, please.
Yeah, moving on to our music here. I really don't have much to say. First of all, how would we ever top our plot discussion here? But really, there isn't a lot to talk about with music.
Nope, there isn't.
There's a little bit in sort of the initial fight in the yacht club between Superman and Volcana, and there's some, sort of incidental music in the end and when she's confronting Kurt and Superman shows up, but it's not... There's not any really sort of like grand villain theme for Volcana, at least not one that was noticeable. And I gave music 4 out of 10 just because I thought it could have used a little bit of something, and we always talk about that with Batman, and even with something like Metallo's theme or Brainiac, like the weird little like techno refrain that plays when Brainiac shows up. Mm-hmm. Like, could have used a little something there, and we don't really get that with Volcana.
I am right on board with you. I think for all those reasons, it's my favorite line. There's nothing offensive about the music in this episode, but nothing stands out as, oh, that was really, really great. There's some Superman refrain, of course. We get the classic Superman refrain. Middle of the road, 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And from there, we can move on to our visuals. For me, Cal, visuals were definitely the strongest part of this episode for me. Mm-hmm. I thought they did an excellent job from the lighting effects that they use when she's using her powers. I think are really, really well done. The initial fight in the yacht club is sort of all illuminated in this orange light, and it's just interesting to see different color palette used than you're used to, and using that very unique power style to kind of give this episode its own unique visual look. Some cool, very classic Superman stuff where he puts out a fire by grabbing a giant propeller and spinning really fast.
That was super cool.
Throwing and getting throwing water at a building on fire, and I really enjoyed this episode visually. I really liked the way they visualized Volcana's powers. I liked the look. You mentioned that the all of the agents basically just look like Hydra agents.
Yeah, clearly they were just like, we're going to write Hydra and Nick Fury into this episode. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot of but I like the look of like the government agents' guns and stuff. They did a lot of good design work, and I thought a lot of good coloration, and I thought it was well animated. The director of this episode was Dan Reba, and I thought it was a really excellent job.
Yeah, I think it was really good. I think that opening scene where there's fire is such a hard thing to animate, especially I think, we talked about the difference between when digital animation took over. Now it's a little bit easier to computer generate what fire looks like in animation. Back then it's all hand-drawn, and if you watch some of the old Max Fleischer Superman episodes, which if you've never watched those, go back and watch them. I can't encourage you enough to do that. But there's, in cartoons, or if you watch Bugs Bunny or anything like that, like sometimes fire looks super hokey, and it's super inconsistent and spotty. Or
like it'll be looped where it's just like it's dancing kind of the exact same way over and over again. Yep. Looks like a GIF.
So it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard thing to, because fire in itself is so, it doesn't maintain a certain pattern. That's why it's so it's random. That's why when you have something that's drawn, and you would have to make it super random to look right. But I think they did in that opening scene. There's a whole scene where the boat's on fire. Superman's in the fire. He's looking through the fire. He sees like the shadow of Volcana as she's stealing the stuff, boat stuff. And I think they did a great job of animating that scene. I agree with you that the animation was really, really strong. I think there's some great opportunities. Superman looking up in a building using his X-ray vision when he sees the director being threatened by the government agents. Even the containment thing that they had her in at the very end, the little bubble that they had her in was a like cool idea. Like, she needs oxygen to create fire, so we're only going to give her enough oxygen to breathe in, to breathe. Nothing more. Yeah. So really, really cool idea. I even like the look of Kurt / Nick Fury. Like he looks cool. Looks like a double crossing government agent. A lot of guys in suits in this episode.
Yeah, so it was very much. It was the G-men. Like it was very very 1940s, 1930s. Full suits and fedoras and. Yep.
So to make that interesting enough for you to hold your attention throughout the whole episode, plus Volcana, the character design of Volcana, as we mentioned, this is a design that was created by this team for this specific series. So the character itself is a creation from scratch. It's a cool look. Her her long flowing fiery red hair. Her costume when she's first introduced with the jacket and the dress underneath of it. Just a good look overall.
Hair has been one of your refrains. Sometimes when they try to do different or try to do unique hairstyles, I know you're not always a fan of that.
It's just when it's in the face or that
bangs,
single strand.
Right.
That single strand of hair. No,
comb overs or bangs are generally not. But the way her hair sort of is like poofy on top and then sort of rolls out, it looks like fire. Like I'm sure that's very intentional, but. It was a cool design choice, I thought.
Yeah, I gave animation, because of how strong it was, I gave it 8 out of 10.
And I also gave visuals and animation 8 out of 10.
We didn't talk about this beforehand.
Absolutely, we never discussed scores.
We share the same blood, though.
That's absolutely true. But, like I said, I think definitely the strongest part of the episode. And if nothing else about this episode is, like, super memorable, I think the visuals of it will stick with me for quite a while.
Certainly.
And moving on to our final category here, we have, of course, our voice acting players. We have the main guest star of the episode. We have Perry Gilpin as Volcana. It's her debut episode. She's probably most famously known as, she's the girlfriend on Frasier.
Roz, yeah. She's, if you ever watched an episode of Frasier, you know exactly who she is. She worked at the radio station. She's like, I think he's producer or something at the radio station that Frasier Crane works at. And then eventually a love interest. And I don't know how that... I never watched the full series. I don't know if they what that resolved with, but she was always like a will they, won't they love interest for Frasier also. So, yeah, I think she does a great job. She's obviously supposed to be a seductive... She uses her her feminine sexuality
Yes.
right from the get-go, and she's supposed to be this vixen type character, and I think her voice plays to that very, very well. Her the sultry tone of her voice, I think, is communicated well. It's a little weird in that last, certainly, where she goes from this dynamic of being who she is, and then she's flirting, Superman and her flirting at the end, as we already talked about. But I think she does a pretty good job of the performance that she does here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a pretty unique type of villain for Superman. Like, there aren't a lot. Not that he doesn't ever fight other women, but it's like this type, like you said, the vixen, like the femme fatale type, who really weaponizes that sexuality and stuff like that is pretty unique there. And I thought she did a really good job of kind of helping to communicate that. But
we also had a couple other famous TV show actors.
Kidding. We had of course, as you mentioned earlier in the show, Dennis Haysbert, the president from 24. You would also know him from saying "That's Allstate Stand."
Yep, he's the Allstate guy.
Allstate guy on commercials, as he was just sort of a random agent in this episode. He doesn't even have a name in the credits.
Agent number 1.
Right, but he's one of the guy who kind of initially intimidates Clark Kent, or tries to, when Clark goes to investigate. We have Peter Gallagher as Kurt Fury.
Yeah, of the OC, one of my favorite shows growing up.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorite shows, and still enjoy it. It's goofy and super over the top. Terrible acting in that. But he was the only good actor really that entire show. So it was interesting to see his name come up.
Yeah, and as you pointed out to me, we were talking the director, who doesn't really have a real name, the director of the School for Gifted Youngsters, for lack of a better term.
Chubby Professor X.
Right. You were like, man, that voice sounds familiar. And then like a minute later after he kept talking, you're like, I think that's William H. Macy. And sure enough, William H. Macy as the director here in this episode.
Yeah, so he was in the Batman Beyond, the second Ink episode,
yes.
Right? And he played, and I didn't necessarily think his performance there was anything. I felt like his lines were delivered pretty robotic from my recollection. Yeah. I think he does a good job in this. He plays this director. He's worried. He knows that this government agency is after him. He's trying to hide something, but he plays. I think he does a decent job here. He had a little bit more opportunity to put some personality in his voice, but yeah, it was interesting that it sounded like him, and then to see it at the end, it's like, oh, okay, I got my ear's still there. That's cool.
Yeah, so that's so overall we can get into our scores here. I gave voice acting 7 out of 10. I think it's good. It's not, the greatest performances of anyone. I think Tim Daly does a solid job as Superman here. He has a little more range to play with because he's, as we mentioned, he's investigative Clark Kent for a lot of this episode, and then he sort of has to, when he's confronting the government, when he's confronting Kurt and the rest of the government agents at the end, he's very like sort of righteously angry, at the idea that the government would be exploiting people with powers and taking advantage of them in this way. And I think I think he does a good job there. But yeah, I went with 7 out of 10, and based on your laughter, I'm guessing you may have come to something similar.
I also gave the exact same score of 7 out of 10 for all of the reasons we already mentioned. It's strong. It's good. I think that there's enough nuance in certain voices for it to be okay. There wasn't a whole lot of dialogue, or that I think that was asked of. The only thing I think that, as far as Volcana could have done a better job at, was being a little more emotional. I think she comes across as, if she's supposed to be this fiery individual, you associate fire with the hot temper and being angry, and she has Kurt at the very end there, she could have really used some like an emotional spectrum, like really like, finally I got my hands on you and I'm going to do this, and it's different, but it's not as passionate. It doesn't come across as authentic, I think, in that way. So 7 out of 10. Yep. So final scores, right?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting around for our final scores here. My total, as I'm adding them all up here, comes to 24 out of 40.
Mine's a tad higher. I went with 26 out of 40, but definitely in the same neighborhood there. I guess now we talk about rewatchability, Liam.
Yeah. For me, I would say, because of what we mentioned, the building blocks of the government being involved with superpowered characters, this is kind of a cool retroactive beginning of that story arc.
Mm-hmm.
We see it continued with when we meet the Royal Flush Gang, the version that shows up in Justice League and the Joker episode, and obviously through, as we mentioned, with all the Cadmus stuff in Justice League Unlimited. So, and because Volcana is, I think, a pretty memorable character, she shows up a couple more times in this series, as well as in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. I think it's worth a watch.
I would say slightly disagree. I'm not going to call it the full disagreement alarm, but I would slightly disagree. I would say it's not a must-watch because they don't specifically say this is Cadmus. It's a retroactive Easter egg, as we like to call them, where they've tied it back into the story afterwards.
Sure.
They do a good enough job explaining it in Justice League Unlimited, what Cadmus is, why they're there. They do enough exposition to explain, and then tie this back in. So I wouldn't say it's not a must-watch. It's not a bad episode. So if you're looking for an episode that is decent, or you just want to watch something that's different, it didn't feel like a typical Superman story. I think a lot of it takes place inside and at night. I think that might have something to do with it too, but inside at night, so it's different enough where, sure, if you want to pop it in, like we just came to the decision, we were looking at it and we were like, hey, yeah, we'll watch this episode. But I wouldn't say it's not, because of the way they tie it into the story later on, it's not a must watch. But if you're interested in going back and like, oh, I want to watch everything that has to do with Cadmus, then sure, you're going to watch this episode.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. But I think that will begin to wrap us up here.
Certainly will.
Thank you so much for listening. We always appreciate that. And you can find all of our past episodes at DCAUreview.com. The archive's up there. Cal set it up where you can search by category, by show, by villain, by lots of different categories. So you can find every single episode we've done.
I guess I'm going to have to set up a Cadmus category now.
This is the opener.
The unofficial official opening of Cadmus. So you'll be able to, once we cover those Cadmus episodes down the line, then we'll be able to go back and, hey, I want to know more about Cadmus. Let me find every episode that Cadmus has been talked about.
If this is definitely, as you mentioned, if you're doing the deep dive DCAU timeline type stuff, this is definitely part of that saga. But yeah, definitely head to DCAUreview.com, check out our past episodes. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes as well as the Google Podcast app if you are a non-Apple user. And if you I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but if you could leave us a 5-star review, that does really help us immensely. It helps bump our show up in like search algorithms and stuff.
Yeah, we got a few up there now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's very much appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you to people that have.
And of course, you can always interact with me on Twitter at DCAU Review. Give us your thoughts on this episode, on how do you feel about them? This sort of retroactively beginning the Cadmus arc. How do you feel about Volcana as a character? Do you think she was underutilized in the series? Would love to hear any feedback on that, as well as what you think we should be reviewing next. We're starting to get towards the end of the month of June here. We have a couple more weeks of Superman, and then we'll be moving on to our next month of reviews. So definitely excited to get our feedback there. But until next week, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.